Sign up for officers if you haven't already. We're doing Auckland Winter Shield. What the heck is this format? So, impromptu tournaments that you can enter. If you want to do something that's fun and go somewhere, go to Officers Cup. It's in Dunedin. It's in September. It'll be really fun. Trials are on Saturday. If you sign up to technically closed, but I'm sure if you email us, then we will let you. You should. Next thing is if you want to do a more development focused tournament that's like semi-competitive, then you can come to Auckland Winter Shield. This is really helpful if you want to practice for officers and you're going to both. I'd recommend going to both. That would be both fun. I just thought I'd plug it because I came up with the name and Harper did the art and I think it's really cool. So if you like themed tournaments that aren't in the season that they market themselves as being in, then you should come. Anyway, 2 things that I'll do before Liam gets here. Firstly, I'll talk through like what happens before the debate, because officers, there's a lot of like admin that you do before the debate that you don't do in other formats. And during the actual debate, I'll just run through what happens. But no, I'm getting in real professionals to run those seminars because I'm just a little am. Anyway, format itself. There are 2 teams of 2 speakers. One's F, one's Neg, but there's only like a first and a second, and only the first can give the reply. First and second speeches are 6 minutes, and reply speeches are 3 minutes. And the order of speeches are, you know, quite similar to 3v3, but you just cut the third speaker. They're a little bit irrelevant in this format. Anyway, before the debate, this is the fun part. You get to do a coin toss, and the coin toss matters. Like, it actually means something. If you win the coin toss, I don't really have a preference for heads or tails, but I'm sure everyone will have heated opinions about whether you should pick heads or tails. If you win, you should always pick side. You can choose to pick side or pick motion. If you pick side, then you get to choose whether you affirm or negate. And if you pick motion, the adjudicator will give you a piece of paper and it has 2 motions on it, and you get to pick one. It's so fun. You should always pick side, because I'll explain why later. But what happens is, if you win the coin toss, say you say side, what happens is the judge will take that piece of paper with the motions on it and give it to the other team. And the other team has 1 minute to decide what motion that they want to do. At the end of that minute, because you want to use all of the time in that minute, because if you only take that 30 seconds, you're just cheating yourself. Don't do that. Spend the whole minute thinking about it. And when you've already chosen in 10 seconds, you can spend 40 seconds prepping, 50 seconds prepping. Anyway, at the end of that 1 minute, then the judge will take another piece of paper that has the motions on it and give it to other team, or you, if you pick side and because you're normal, and you would get to decide whether you pick F or neg. You should pick neg. If you pick F or neg, you'll tell the other team whether you pick F or neg at the end of your minute. So basically, there's a whole 2 minutes of admin before you even start actually prepping for the debate. So when people tell you that it's 25 minutes of prep, they're lying. It's actually around 6 or 7, but you don't know for certain. Like, it's up. Most people will pick neg, but if they throw you a curveball, then maybe you do end up having to prep the other side in that 5 minutes. But most of the time you can spend that extra minute, if you're the team that picked motion, prepping the neg side. Anyway, here's a little bit of information about why you should pick side and then why you should pick neg. The reason that you should pick side is because there's a neg bias, and that because you're the one, like, you speak second after F, it's more likely that the judge is going to pick you, because judges can't, you know, get rid of that bias sometimes, even though they try it. You also get more time to prep because you like have that minute where you're certain about what motion that you're doing and what side you're on. So you actually get 6 minutes of prep rather than 5. And neg is more fun. F is boring, it's lame, it's stinky. You should always pick side and always pick neg. In trials though, you probably will get told what you're doing. So this is for the real tournament. Yeah. He's walking from work. Next thing. Why should you pick motion? Trick question. You should never pick motion. Only if you're insane and only if you love losing, then you can pick motion. If you're like getting to the last round of the tournament and you're like, you know what, I just want to do a fun one, and they like give you 2 random motions and then you can pick the one that you have weird spec knowledge on, sure, do that, but I wouldn't. Don't do it. During the debate, disclaimer, I'm not an expert. This is why I have real debating legends coming in to give you the rest of these seminars. Note, Liam will be here any minute. if you want to come to the rest of them, and you all should, because I'll cry if you don't, next week, it's going to be about first speeches. So if you get picked as a first speaker in trials, or you want to learn how to do it, I have Officers Cup winner, Understand Who, coming in to give a seminar on first speeches. If you want to learn about second speeches, that's what is happening the week after. Winner and best speaker of 2021 officers, Shah, is coming in to do a seminar. And then to finish off our little officers series, we have the reply seminar, and we have Girl Boss and all-round reply bestie Aisha coming in to give the reply seminar, and she was in the semi-finals. So smart.
Realistically, Liam is coming today as actual winner of Officers 2021.
Yeah, exactly. Disclaimer: Liam and Harry were robbed in Officers 2021 final. They literally did just win. Anyway,
They just lost to a red ball.
Here's some like brief introductions to what you should do in the debate if you're the other speakers. But note this is my take, and that shouldn't, like, if other speakers next week and the week after say different things, you should listen to them way more. I'm dumb. Don't listen to me. First speakers. This is just, I think it'd be nice for you guys to know before trials, and you know, you don't just get thrown in, don't know what you're doing. First speakers, give your speech. Cool. But when you're on the bench, I think officers is so much about who your teammate is. In 3v3, you can hate your teammates and you'll get through it. Officers, if you hate each other, you'll crash and burn. For example, me and Josh, dream team, such a good combo, so amazing. Other combos, can't speak for them, it was quite tragic. Couple teams never work anyway. Please listen to your second speaker after you finish your speech though, because what happens is that in officers, because you only have 5 minutes in prep to think about your case, often you get it wrong. That's okay. The second speaker is allowed to pivot and like pretend and gaslight the judge into thinking that your case was actually something different. But you as a first speaker will be given the reply. So you want to make sure that you aren't biased towards your own speech in the reply, and that you pivot with your second speaker to their speech. So listen to them. Otherwise, you might accidentally pivot back to the wrong case and then you lose. Neg, you should still talk to your second speaker during the first speech, but try and keep bench talk to a minimum before the first speaker gives their speech. Otherwise, it's too overwhelming. You want to just focus on getting the case up, and then you can talk about strategy later. If you're a second speaker, it's all about strategy. It's so fun. So that's in my advice slide, but let's just talk about what you should do as a second speaker. You need to pivot the case. Ellie and Bridget were really good at this at officers, and it was really annoying. But the best combo that you can be is that the first speaker just content dumps. Every single point in the debate that you could deliver, you deliver it, and then the second speaker goes, aha, they missed that our case was actually about this the whole time, and they never responded. And then you just gaslight them into thinking that was true, and the reply is like, that's why we won. Make sure you are telling the first speaker that you pivoted though. Otherwise, maybe they didn't listen, they don't know. Strategies for trials. 1, do your best. Team numbers are fake. If you feel like you did one shit round, that's okay. You got 3 more to recover from, baby. Officers is short and fun. Secondly, strategy. The best thing that you can do for yourself is just show the selectors that you have some idea what's going on in debating. Maybe you fuck up one point. That's okay. Maybe you don't really respond to some things well, but you show that you're responding to the right things. That's what selectors are looking for. So generally, that's my third point of advice. Just show the selectors the best version of yourself. You don't need to knife people to show the selectors the best version of yourself. Like if Rhoda's responding to me, he doesn't need to be like, Melissa is a terrible person and I hate her. He just needs to be like, oh yeah, Melissa had some really dumb points, and here's exactly why, because I know how to respond because I'm a good debater. Fourth bullet point, don't be better than me. I'll be really sad if everyone out-trials me, so please don't make me cry. I feel like I've been pretty good friends to you all, so hopefully you keep that in mind. And then fifthly, debating is fake. And when I was at officers this year, Daniel gave me and Josh this really big spiel about how team numbers actually don't matter, and that because he broke his A4 100 years ago, that means that anything is possible. So it's possible, I guess. Evidence shows that you don't need to be A1 to break. You can be A4, or at this officer, you can be A13. Yeah, road to A100, baby. And yeah, I think that's all of my suggestions. The main thing is if you want to be a part of the Auckland Rising movement, come to offices. It'll be really fun. Anyway, Liam has some very epic and fun slides planned for us. So I hope you're all excited for them, because I am. I saw them before and I was so inspired by them. I had to make a Facebook post making it criminal offence to not come.
Melissa, I like how you always invite me to dev seminars like an hour before dev seminars.
Because that's when I make the event.
Why do you not make the event earlier than an hour before dev seminar?
Because I always forget.
Better dev officer.
We fell flat, didn't it?
I'd like to see you make all these seminars, Josh. This is not an easy job, okay?
I can pay for all these seminars.
And I gave a very obvious disclaimer at the start of this seminar that I'm running off a very, very limited amount of sleep. I went to bed at 5 a.m. Never do mooting.
Oh my god.
Liam's here.
Hi, friends.
It's 2021 Officers Cup winner, Liam Silverwood.
Oh my god, everyone
Well,
clap.
not quite.
No, he did win. That was the wrong result.
Did you lose?
I feel that one.
Amber and
lost
Shah.
It was an unjust loss, but definitely on. And
This is the final.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, audience. I can't get the camera to work. Trust me, he's really glorious in person.
What's the final record?
Yes, I think.
no, the final wasn't.
Was it not streamed? Oh, that's sad.
We were breaking COVID regulations.
No, we weren't. No one heard that. Can you just share the thing with the exec drive, and then I can bring them up?
So true. Yeah.
It was about I don't know, about like med school students going over.
Oh, that
The
one.
motion, yeah, the motion
The
was
slide.
whether you should.
I've definitely seen
That says a lot about
it.
Well, Mom missed the case at first. Liam gave it back to me. And then it got
Wow, I
cut down,
saved the audience from seeing me, but
I had like a poll of who was winning, and it was like 18 votes to 2 in favor of Liam and Harry until about the fly, and then it was like 50-50. So I was like, yes, that's fine. Omar won this with 5 people.
let's create some hype. I should put on some like suspenseful music.
What else?
There was no cheering.
Again. Oh my god. Develop us, Liam.
I will in a moment. I'm gonna get the slides.
Is it shared yet?
Yeah.
We cannot share our room. I'm staying if you talk like that,
You go,
Melissa,
Liam.
you look like in person, but you also look really nice on the Zoom.
Oh, okay. I don't like my eyebrows.
No, nice.
I'm a little tall. Sorry. Yeah, my debating, Officers Cup CV. So I've been to every Officers Cup since I started uni. Didn't really do much of the first two. I was sick for trials in first year, so I traineed and had a fun time, didn't credit. Then I judged and I wasn't very good. And then I started speaking and spoke in 2020, 2021, and 2021 I made it to the finals. It was had some other office and cup related achievements there. So I guess most of you will probably know in the room know the basics. Melissa's probably already told you. The only thing I really want to emphasize is like don't do the cringe thing and pick F unless you really, really want to, or it's like a really fun mission. You know, you can break all the rules sometimes, but I think it is just quite a big advantage to go neg, especially if you are really new to the format. Having that much extra prep time really does help a lot. As you know, when you're like less confident at kind of speaking on the fly or speaking with limited prep. The only other thing I think I would say is do make sure you like whisper this to your teammate, because you don't have long to make decisions. You might miss something really obvious, like a killer point for one side that you didn't think of. So do take a bit of time to like think about picking the motion don't necessarily just go with like the first initial vibes. Yeah, that's the only important thing from that side. In terms of how to allocate your prep time, you really don't have long before you want to start writing your speech. So I think given that you'll be like thinking in your head already in the time where you're like discussing the motion when you first see it, aim for like about 20 seconds maximum for kind of individual brainstorming, you know, once you pitch the motion, because you've already had a bit of time invested thinking about it. And then probably like 60 seconds just chatting with your teammate. Hopefully you'll have like similar vibes on the case. There won't be anything really, really bad that you have to talk through for a really long time. And then the rest, in that 60 seconds, you kind of want to flesh out a little bit of the structure of the case, like what you're going to say, all the kind of typical stuff that you do in like 3v3, but just super, super compressed into a really, really short time frame. And the rest of the time, you need to be writing your case. And obviously, you want to start doing this right away. As soon as you know the motion, or as soon as you know the side, start doing this and start using your time. This is kind of just like a rough guide. Like, don't spend too long watching the clock because you'll probably just panic as a result, or spend too long staring at the clock and not long enough staring at your notes and your pen and your paper. So do a few practices, kind of get used to the timing and used to the flow of it, and it will start to become natural. And you'll start to know when you need to move on. The other really, really important thing is you shouldn't write your intro or any of the other just random stuff that you would normally write. It's kind of just nice to have. You need to really get used to coming up with intros on the spot. I think if you're quite an experienced speaker and you're someone that finds that like a 6-minute speech isn't really long enough to develop as much as you like, stick to the most like basic possible like 1 or 2 sentence intro. But if you do find that you if you're like struggling to make time in practices, you do need a bit more time, don't be afraid to kind of wax lyrical in your intro. Be a little bit more theatrical. You can have more of like a typical kind of 30-second long intro, and you're perfectly fine if you're like, if you otherwise wouldn't be using that time. But you can just kind of come up with them on the spot. You can come up with like pretty formulaic intros. Just think of like a really good example of your side. All the classic stuff that you just do when coming up with an intro, just don't write it down. And it's really, really tempting if you're on the neg to think, oh, well, I have like 5 minutes prep plus a 6-minute speech. So I have twice as much prep time. I don't have to write my speech. I think that's a really bad trap to fall into, because that means then you're trying to write your speech while also listening to the case that comes out and coming up with responses and writing them down. So I think if you're on neg, try and have your case essentially finished at the end of prep. Just pretend you're on the app, so you have like all of their speech where you can be listening and coming up with responses and writing responses, rather than trying to do 2 things at once and missing their case or having to have like your second speaker desperately whisper responses or remind you what you said during that speech. It's really, really hard to do that during offices, and missing responses at first is just like deadly, because then if you're first neg and you don't respond, you have like 1 more speech in which you can respond, and then the debate's pretty much over. So you really, really got to make sure you do have a responsive first neg speech. You don't want to be writing during that speech. In terms of picking the case, the best tip I can give you is just go with your heart, go with the most obvious kind of vibes. There'll be something that's pretty obvious about the motion, some kind of point that just like leaps out at you when you see the motion. That's probably the right point to go with. The biggest mistake you can make is to go too big brain, to try and prove something that's really, really hard to prove, and you just don't have the time in the debate to do it. So think of something really narrow, really kind of simple and clear. This is the point that the judge will care the most about. You prove how you get it, and then you explain a bit about the impacts, the outcomes. It kind of is like, it sounds very simplistic, but you really do have to keep things nice and simple and clear so you don't stretch yourself too thin. I think the last point on the slide might be a bit controversial. I can't really remember exactly what consensus was in like second speaker splits. I think generally, if you're thinking about like the second speaker's kind of split, it probably wants to be based on what's come out of the first. So like if you're familiar with BP, think of it as being like a bit of an inwards extension. Like you're adding to the debate, but you're not going in like a really radical different direction. You're building upon what's already been said. So I think normally it's fine to not think really, really intensely about the second speaker's speech. Just kind of focus on the first speech. Focus on what is that like one super, super clear point that leaps out of you. How can we prove it and prove it well? Just go ham on like one single point. You kind of want to prove it as solidly as you can. As many mechanisms as you can think of, as many, as much impacting as you can to make that one single point basically debate winning. when I say 1 point, I think it is also fine to like split your speech up into 2 points for purely kind of structural purposes. Like maybe you want to have like a first point about context, and then your second point will be kind of everything else. Or, you know, in an active debate, you can still have like your first point be, oh, well, what does I actually care about? Second point, how do we get there? That's you're still kind of just really proving one thing, but you've like split your speech up just for kind of structural reasons, just to make it easier, you know, easier to write. That is fine, but don't try and prove like two different things. The other really important thing about picking the case is probably just like as a general rule, never pick a principle. They don't matter. The principle like should just be as simple as, you know, we want more good things because good things are good. Like it really doesn't need to go any deeper than that. Your point should be kind of the obvious point that proves that the world is a better place. And that's you know, as deep as the principle needs to go in most debates. There might be cases where you know want to break the rules, but stick to them until you know when those cases are. In terms of actually writing your speech, I put lots of big flashing arrows and sirens around that first bullet point because I think it's probably the single most important thing you could take away from this prep seminar. If you have like a really, really rigid kind of formulaic structure that you practice a lot and you get really used to, it becomes really, really easy to write a speech because you're kind of just like filling in the blanks or filling in the slots. So I just like to use the kind of classic like schools debater structure of context, mechanisms, and then your outcomes or impacts. Because that means during prep time, you don't waste any time thinking about like how you're going to structure the point or where you're going to put that mechanism, things like that. It's all just like flowing nicely and linearly in the way that you practice. So if you're unfamiliar with this structure, context is where you're just kind of like telling us a little bit about kind of the world as it is. So a few facts. Sometimes you might be a little bit assertive in your context. So it might be things that are quite obvious and you get away with just kind of saying them. Lots of the time, though, you want to like explain why things are the way they are. So you'll say like, I know, what's a hypothetical notion? Anybody have any ideas?
The lying one, the one where you can't lie.
I'll use that one for later because the one that came to the front of my mind was the like Otago doctor's debate. So for those of you who don't know, grand final was about like med students going overseas and having a holiday and lying and say it was a placement. So maybe your context is that medical students tend to come from like quite privileged backgrounds, or that's the kind of contextual point that you're trying to establish. So you can just say that, and that's okay. And some judges might just buy that, but it's better to do the classic, debate thing of saying the reason for this is because med school is really hard to get into. That means you got to have good grades in high school. You want to have good grades in high school. It helps to have things like tutors. Tutors cost money, which is, means your parents have to have money. Blah blah blah, and they kind of prove that context. Mechanisms is just like explaining how things happen, so kind of flowing on from that context. What does that mean for the debate? So maybe your mechanism is that means that out of touch and bad doctors as a result, and kind of need to have like real placements in the real world, and a placement is a really useful experience. They're missing out on it. They become bad doctors. Something like that, where you're establishing like some sort of change in the world as a result of what's happened. And impacting is just where you like explain why you should care about that. So kind of emotive language, think about groups in society that you care about, all that kind of stuff. So it's just an explanation of what that structure is. The other really, really important thing about following like a really rigid formulaic structure is it means that if everything goes wrong in prep and you manage your time badly, you don't finish writing your speech, you'll probably still be fine because you kind of know in your head what comes next. So you can stop at like if the bell goes off at the end of 5 minutes and you're like halfway through writing your mechanisms, you can just scroll down a few words for the rest of the mechanisms. And once you reach the end of them, because you're so practiced and used to the structure, okay, I finished all my, like when you're actually speaking, I finished all my mechanisms. Now I need to do some impacting. And hopefully you'll be able to come up with some sort of impacting on the spot. Where you'll, have had it in your head during prep. You just come up with the words and start speaking on the fly without having notes. In terms of like the actual physical act of writing your notes, be really, really, really efficient. So no like full sentences. Kind of ease yourself into the structure. It is something you have to like practice quite a lot. So think about your current note-taking style. Think about all the ways you can strip out all the things you don't need. So in most debates, I write like kind of partial sentences. In offices, I'll just write like a kind of collection of words and a bunch of arrows pointing between them to kind of show how they link. So, I might just write, if my point context is like that point about doctors being privileged, I might just write like privilege, arrow, like high school, arrow, tutors. And then that's enough to kind of remind me of that point, and I come up with the words and fill in all the blanks on the spot when I'm speaking. It does take a bit of practice to like cut down your note taking. So you can like practice on your own if you want ahead of trial, just like do a few prep practices on your own, just like write out a case, deliver it, see how it goes, try again. Yeah, and if you do run out of time, you don't want to rant in offices too much, because ranting can kill you, because ranting causes you to be messy and not make the points that you need to make, or waste too much time on one point and not enough on the other. So it is best to have your speech kind of written out, have your entire speech finished at the end of prep. But if it is the last 30 seconds, do just like write down the header of a point, or the absolute bare minimum that you can just see and remind yourself. And also, as a result of being so pressed for time, you are going to kind of forget things during prep and want to go back and fill in the blanks. So make sure you write really, really big and leave lots and lots of blank spaces. So in your second speaker whistles and you're, I've got another mechanism, and you're, at the end of your point, you can then go back and write it in. You're not trying to like write over the top of what you've already written. So like, don't be afraid to have just like an absurd number of pieces of paper. If you need to do like one piece of paper per mechanism, that's fine. Lots of other people will be doing like similar things. You'll just look the same as them. So just huge, big blank pieces of paper with a couple of words on them is what you want your note-taking style to kind of look like towards the end once you finish practicing. And obviously a lot of this is also quite like individual, so do just find a style that works for you. But that's what I recommend, and I think it's like a good kind of general strategy. So if you're a second speaker, it can be very tempting to think you get to just sit back, relax, you don't have anything to do because your speech is, half an hour away, and that's ages away, and you don't have to speak. But that, unfortunately, is not true. You don't get to do those things. So you kind of just have to do all the normal things that you do as like a non-first speaker in prep. But because your first speaker is going to be quite stressed and like rapidly writing your speech, they won't have as much time to like kind of dictate things clearly to you. So they won't be able to say at the start of prep, okay, start thinking of mechanisms for my second point. And when I get there, I'll ask you for them. No time for any of that like nice politeness. They'll just be like stressed, writing really, really quickly. They'll like yell at you, give me another mechanism, things like that. So you really need to be kind of on top of like managing yourself a little bit and kind of keeping an eye on where your first speaker is in their speech and knowing what they're likely to need. And I'm a first speaker, so I've never actually been a second speaker in prep time, but I think if I was a second speaker, that's what I would try and do to make sure I was a good prep buddy. So yeah, I think try and like read what they're writing as best as you can and try and think like one step ahead. So if you see that they're writing out, like they're still on their context, start thinking about mechanisms and jotting them down in your own notes. So when they get to there and they're like, oh shit, I can't think of any mechanisms, I've forgotten everything, like tell me what to write. You can just read off your own list and dictate to them, and they can start writing it down. So it is quite hard, obviously, to like, you're not a mind reader. You will want to like practice a lot with your partner so you can kind of learn how they work, mesh with them a bit, and start kind of working together as a team. But yeah, always try and think one step ahead. Or, you want to be like ready to jump in when they ask, but you want to be kind of thinking ahead of them. So you're thinking of examples when they're writing the mechanisms. You're thinking of mechanisms when they're writing context. That kind of stuff to make sure you always have like something available to help them when they're panicked and yell out for help desperately because they are about to speak and have nothing to say. So I think that's the end of my slides. That is, how I would prep my own cases. What I think you should do is prep your cases. Does anybody have any questions about prep? Any general comments, concerns, etc.?
I have a general comment. I like how you did your executions with your stock photos.
They just come like that. I didn't
take that back then. Be more confident.
Yeah. Sorry. I was going to steal just a PowerPoint template from what they just have lots of like random photos of windmills and stuff.
I actually know. I'll save this question for Asian. Unless you have like a great answer to this, which is like, what's the best way to track shifts in like the debate when you're doing replies like the first and freedom of speeches?
I think I think as a first speaker in offices, you actually have a bit of an easy ride once your speech is over because there are no POIs, so you don't have to think about that. And you can, like, your job is basically just to sit there kind of watching the debate. So I think if you're used to like spectating debates and kind of thinking a little bit like an adjudicator, you probably will be able to spot when they're shifting a little bit. I guess probably an easy way to spot that would be like, look back at your notes and think about what like the case that came out in your speech was and what the really, really important things that you were trying to emphasize were. And then, you know, have they responded to those? Have they responded so well that they have like successfully shifted the debate, or have they just ignored them? And that's how they tried to shift it. And then also think about like what came out of their first speaker and you know, how that's different from their second speaker. So it's I guess the same kind of skill set as a normal debate, but you have less time. The shifts will be quicker as a result. Like cases will shift quite quickly and quite radically between speeches. Well, they might, sometimes they might not, depends on the debate. But yeah, the big upside is you don't have to think about POIs, you just have to think about reply and listening to speeches and come up with responses. But also ask Aisha, because she'll probably have a better answer, or at least a different answer.
How do you approach trials, Liam?
How do I approach trials? I always approach trials in very like kind of kickback way. Like I just don't really think about them. I try to avoid stressing about them. I never look at the trial list and like try and match up the likely teams or anything like that. I think that's a bad way to like prep yourself. I mean, it might be like fun in some cases. You can do it if you want, but I feel like it would just make me more stressed. If you go in with no expectations, then you can't be disappointed. That's my kind of general vibe. The other thing I think is it can be like tiring. So bring some snacks ahead of time. I always forget that and end up like spending lots and lots of money at vending machines. Yeah, bring a drink, bring lots of paper. Yeah, I think the other thing about having no expectations is means that things like don't go your way, or if they go so well your way that you like try a lot better than people are expecting, means you know you don't feel like you don't feel bad about like taking a friend's spot or anything like that, or you don't like your friends don't feel the same way. Like, yeah, just be chill about it. You try it.
I'm not always on trial yet.
How do we defeat on my trials?
Is she trialing?
She is.
Wow.
Who's trialing?
I think my advice though would be
See the site slower.
yeah. You don't have to be on it. You know, like she needs a teammate, and your teammate doesn't have to beat you. So
And like she didn't out trial whoever the umber of her year was when she was in first year, right?
Yeah. I think sometimes like trials can be fun because you can get like kind of quite lopsided routes, and that's a really good way to develop like prepping with a really experienced speaker who you know has done a lot of debating. It can be a good way to like learn a little bit about how they think or how they structured their prep, because you know like you get first-hand experience basically of how they do debating. It can be a really good way to just like pick it up kind of through osmosis and you know become better that way. And if they, you know, if the other team's really stacked and they have like a great killer case, that's okay. Like the judges obviously kind of like the judges aren't going to penalize you for like not destroying like a really good experienced debater, but it's a good way to like have some smart responses and you know kind of show you are like a kind of smart debater and you can you know fight it out and have potential to dragon slay even if you don't like dragon slay 100% of the time. You know, it's all about the potential.
Also, my advice for trying also is that like selectors are doing like a lot of things at once, and they do make like weird room matches up and stuff. So don't try and predict how you're doing in trials based on how the room selection's going.
Yeah.
No, but sometimes I'm like,
Do you have trauma vehicles?
no.
Yeah, like I'm sure you've all judged at like school tournaments and heard about selections, and there's just a lot of randomness. There's a lot of just like kind of vibes based things, you know, like don't put too much stock in it. It's all kind of just made up.
Melissa said that, didn't it? Debating is fake.
Yeah, that was one of my bullet points. One of my other bullet points was don't beat me in trials.
Yeah. Well, no, I think it's like one of the best ways to get better at debating is just to practice lots and lots, because you learn about all the kind of like weird norms that you don't really know exist, and you know, ways of making arguments that you find really persuasive that you just kind of get through experience, because it's always made up. Not really.
Yeah. And yeah, like what I said about A4 breaking and like, you know, whatever combination you are, it's about the combination in this format more than any other format, because it's about how you gel in those 5 minutes. So like they could put two amazing speakers on like A2, A3, but then they hate each other, so they don't do good. So you can steal their spot in the quarterfinals, because we're going to get quarterfinals this year.
Yeah.
It's my dying wish.
Melissa will accredit this year.
No, that's not why. I just want to break the fourth tournament. Anyway, then you can break it like A11. Doesn't matter. Also, there are so many of you trialing and you're all so good. Of course, there's going to be like they don't. At some point, it's just like A3 through 7 are all equally as good as each other. So the number they get is just a number.
Yeah.
Is there any advice if you hate your partner, or you just don't know?
It's a learning experience, Queen. I don't want to say this, but there was a certain tournament in my first year that I did not love. Thankfully, it got cancelled. But it's a good learning experience, because you have to learn to be a teammate in that moment, because you're not just friends. Like when you're at a tournament with your friends, I think that you can just lean on your friendship more than you do your debating ability. Or when it's all about your debating ability, that's when you can grow the most.
Melissa and I actually spoke at a tournament in her first year, but it was not cancelled.
So yeah, that's why I said the cancelled part, because I don't want Liam to think about it. That's actually my favorite tournament.
Yeah. My parents actually came to watch a couple of debates.
Oh, yeah, I bet they're like, oh, why is Liam with this really dumb girl?
No.
Would you recommend creating like a template for a formulaic structure then?
I think it's just a template like in your mind. Like I feel like templates are probably too rigid, because sometimes you might have like a really short context section. Sometimes it'll be like really long. It kind of just depends on the debate. So yeah, I think just have like a blank piece of paper for your template. Yeah.
Also, the motion set officers can be kind of wet. Like last year, there was one about like whether you should kill the octopus that you're dealing. So like you might not be able to structure your way through that one. It might just become vibes.
Yeah.
So,
It was like you were
a documentary and
and
it might imply that you're in a sexual relationship with the octopus.
It didn't. Some rooms interpreted it that way. I don't know if it was implied.
You really love this octopus. Should you save the octopus?
Yeah.
It was about.
say, but then you're like,
Yeah, there was like a real documentary where a guy, I can't remember what it's called. I did actually watch it. He followed an octopus for like a year and then watched it die.
Wait, really? I was gonna say, why? It's not okay.
anything that comes out of you.
Thanks everyone for watching on the live stream. If you want to hear more reasons, you should come to Club Night for real, or you should message me. I'm always down.
I can think of some